Hey everyone, and welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be tackling a topic that's really blowing up right now, emerging tech. We're talking specifically about the ever-evolving world of blockchain, augmented reality, and virtual reality. And trust me, this isn't just about the latest gadgets or Silicon Valley buzzwords. This is about real-world impact, stuff that's changing how we live and work.
Exactly. It seems like every day there's some new headline about this tech.
Right. We've gone through a ton of articles and research for this deep dive, and let me tell you, some of this stuff is like straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Totally. It's incredible to see how quickly these technologies are going from futuristic fantasies to, well, reality.
Okay, so should we just dive right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Now, I know when a lot of people hear blockchain, their minds immediately go to cryptocurrency. And yeah, it's true, blockchain is the tech behind Bitcoin and all those other digital currencies, but honestly, that's just scratching the surface.
It really is.
I like to think of blockchain kind of like a digital ledger, but instead of it being locked away in some vault, it's totally public. Everyone can see the transactions, but, and this is the key thing, it's virtually impossible to tamper with. That inherent security and transparency is what makes it so revolutionary.
It's true. And that's because of what blockchain is at its core. It's about decentralization, transparency, immutability, and smart contracts. These aren't just techie buzzwords. They represent a fundamental shift in how we think about trust and security in the digital age.
Okay, so let's break those down a bit, because I feel like we could spend a whole other deep dive just on that. What exactly do we mean by decentralization?
So in a traditional system, data is usually stored in one central location, like a bank or a government institution. This obviously makes it vulnerable to a lot of things, attacks, errors, even manipulation. Blockchain, though, this is the cool part, it distributes data across a whole network of computers. So there's no single point of failure, which makes it super secure.
Okay, so walk me through this, because I feel like some people might be like, well, I still don't get it.
Sure. So imagine you're trying to change a piece of information on a blockchain. You would need to change it on every single computer on that network at the exact same time.
Which is basically impossible.
Pretty much.
That's really interesting. That whole concept of taking power away from those big institutions and distributing it more evenly is really powerful.
It is, and it opens up a ton of possibilities.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that reflected in some of the potential applications in the research we've been looking at. Voting is a big one.
Huge. We've seen how vulnerable traditional voting systems can be to fraud.
Right, like who can forget about those hanging chads?
Exactly. Blockchain-based voting could potentially record and tally votes on a secure, transparent platform that can't be tampered with. It would really increase trust in the democratic process, which is something we definitely need right now.
It would be huge. Are there any countries trying that out?
Yeah, actually, there are a few countries already running pilot programs using blockchain-based voting.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so we've got decentralization and security covered. But what about this transparency piece? How does that actually work in the real world?
Supply chains are a really good example. A lot of companies are using blockchain to track where products come from.
Everything from the coffee beans we were just talking about?
To diamonds.
Wow. So you're saying I could potentially trace my morning cup of coffee back to the actual farm it came from?
Exactly. Every step of the journey is recorded on the blockchain. That means the entire process is transparent and accountable.
That's huge, not just for businesses, but also for consumers.
Right. It helps ensure things are ethically sourced, fights counterfeiting, and can even promote fair trade practices.
So it's like a win-win.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've tackled the blockchain, a technology that's all about decentralization and transparency.
Lots of potential there.
Definitely. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about something a little more, well, visual. Augmented reality and virtual reality. I feel like those terms get thrown around a lot.
All the time.
And I think it's easy to get them confused.
Yeah, it's understandable. A lot of people lump them together. But AR and VR are actually totally different experiences.
Okay, so break it down for us.
So augmented reality, or AR, that's all about enhancing the real world. It takes digital elements and kind of overlays them onto your view of the real world. You usually experience this through your smartphone screen or with special glasses.
Oh, okay. So like Pokemon Go, that was AR, right?
Yeah.
Where you're catching those little digital creatures out in the real world.
Exactly. You're still in the real world with AR, but it's enhanced with those digital elements.
That makes sense. So then VR is the one where you're completely immersed in a different world.
Exactly. Virtual reality is all about creating a fully immersive experience. You're transported to a completely different environment, a virtual one usually through a headset.
It's like those old sci-fi movies where people would plug into a totally different reality.
Right. It's pretty wild to see how quickly some of those futuristic ideas are becoming our present.
It really is. And speaking of the future, the research we read talks about AR and VR going way beyond gaming, virtual concerts, trying on clothes without leaving your house. It's like the line between the digital world and the physical world is starting to blur.
That's a really great point. And it's not just about entertainment either. The applications for AR and VR go way beyond that.
Okay, so like what? What are we talking about here?
We'll take retail, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine being able to shop for clothes from your living room, trying on different styles, different sizes, all virtual ED.
Okay, yeah, as someone who hates the fitting room, that does sound kind of amazing. Is that actually happening, though? Or is that more of a future possibility?
It's definitely happening now. A lot of retailers are starting to build AR and VR into their online stores, and it goes beyond just clothes. Imagine being able to redecorate your entire living room virtually, moving furniture around, trying out different paint colors.
So no more buyer's remorse on that impulse purchase.
Exactly. You can see exactly how it would look before you buy it.
That's really cool. Our research also mentioned something called virtual showrooms.
Yeah, so that takes it even further.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to explore a car dealership from your couch. You can check out all the different models in 3D, maybe even take a virtual test drive.
That's pretty wild. But I have to imagine that actually creating these kinds of experiences, especially on a large scale, it must come with some pretty big challenges.
You're absolutely right. Developing these immersive, interactive experiences, it definitely presents some pretty big hurdles, technically speaking.
So like what are some of the biggest challenges facing AR and VR right now? So like
Now,
what are some of the biggest challenges facing AR and VR right now?
well, cost is a big one. Those high-quality VR headsets and AR glasses, they're expensive. Not exactly accessible for everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've got to have the money to even try this stuff out.
Right. And then on top of that, there are the technical hurdles. Creating truly immersive experiences. That takes a ton of processing power, especially as we move towards more complex applications and stuff.
So it's not just about having a cool idea. It's about having the infrastructure to actually support it.
Exactly. And then we can't forget about the user experience.
Oh, right. Like actually using the things.
Yeah. VR has gotten so much better, but motion sickness is still a problem for some people.
I can see that.
And with AR, it's all about creating intuitive interfaces, making sure it integrates seamlessly with the real world.
It seems like with all this emerging tech, there's this constant back and forth between like the wow factor and then the actual reality of bringing these innovations to everyone.
It's a balancing act for sure.
But even with all those challenges, it still feels like we're on the edge of something really big.
I think so too. It's fascinating to see how these technologies are already blurring those lines between the physical and digital, and the potential applications. They go way beyond just entertainment and shopping.
Okay, so like what? What are we talking about?
Healthcare is a really interesting example. Our research talked about surgeons using AR headsets during surgery. They can see vital signs and critical patient data right there in their field of view.
Wow, so they don't even have to look away from the patient.
Exactly. And VR is being used to create simulations for training doctors and nurses.
That's amazing. It's like we're stepping into a future we used to just read about in books.
I know, right? And we can't forget about education. Imagine students being able to experience historical events firsthand through VR. Or like dissecting a virtual frog in biology class.
Okay, now that's a biology class I could get behind. So it seems like the potential really is limitless here. But with all this talk about how technology is advancing, it makes you wonder, what does it all mean for us? Like, what should we be paying attention to as this stuff continues to evolve?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it's more important than ever for everyone to have at least a basic understanding of how these technologies work and the impact they could have.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on emerging tech, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
That these technologies, blockchain, AR, VR, they're not just abstract ideas or fads,
Mm-hmm.
They have potential to completely change so many industries and how we live our lives. Staying informed and engaged, it's not a luxury anymore, it's essential.
It really is. It's an exciting time to be alive. Who knows what incredible innovations are just around the corner, right?
Who knows?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. Be sure to check out our next episode where we'll be diving into another fascinating topic. Until then, keep exploring.